Hello, this is Gary Chaffee, and welcome to the first edition of Patterns with Gary. In this series of podcasts, I'm going to be talking about the major topics that are contained in the Patterns books, including rhythm and meter, my new system of stickings, and the whole linear concept. Now, my goal has always been to help students find their own voice. Let's face it, if you're going to spend hours and days and weeks and months and years practicing, do you really want to wind up just sounding like everyone else? Finding your own voice is a long journey, and part of that journey involves learning new things, new ideas, new concepts, new materials, and learning how you can incorporate them into your playing. There's an old saying, you are what you practice. So, you want to learn how to play a fast double bass drum roll? Spend an hour a day for a year or so on that, and you'll have it. Want to learn how to phrase ideas through the time? Spend an hour a day on that, and you'll have thousands of different things you can do. Which do you think would be more valuable? Now, as a drummer, you normally have two functions. Most often, you're playing time. Occasionally, you get the chance to play solos. These two functions vary greatly depending upon the style of music that you're playing, be it jazz or rock or Latin. What you do when you play time in a jazz group is a lot different than what you do when you play time in a rock or Latin group. The types of solo forms you get are also different, from trading, fours or eights or choruses, to soloing over vamps, to standalone solos. Almost all of the material we'll be working on in these podcasts can be used in both situations, so we'll be looking at various ways you can do this. There's a concept I call the three amigos. Whenever you play anything, time or solo, there are always three things involved: what, where, and how. What refers to the figures and rhythms that you play. How refers to what you use to play those rhythms with, singles or doubles or stickings or linear figures. Where you play those figures on the set is the third amigo. We tend to use certain parts of the set when we play time and other parts when we solo, but we're always doing all three amigos at the same time. So by exploring each of these in detail, you're going to find tons of new ideas, and that's the whole point. Now, in each podcast, we'll be looking at some ideas related to one of the main topics. I'll be discussing various materials for the book and how you can work on them. I'll also give you some ideas about applying the materials to the set, both for time functioning and soloing. Some of you may be familiar with this material. Others may have never worked on it. So I'll try to use examples that would be interesting and useful to both. We're going to start with double strokes, one of the most basic stickings we have. Most people think of double strokes in terms of rolls, which is one thing they can do. However, I'm talking about using them on the set for fills and solos, where they offer a lot of interesting possibilities. Now, there's two things you can do with a double stroke. You can move it, where you play it on one sound and then move it to a different sound, or you can break it up, playing one note on one sound and then the next note on a different sound. I call this a broken double. So what you need to do is to run through both of these motions on your set in as many ways as possible. In my Sticking Patterns book on pages 28 through 33, all of the basic versions are written out in 16th notes for a 4-piece set. There's a lot, close to a couple of hundred, and I didn't include every possible version, but only those I thought were reasonable. And these are all 2-beat examples, so when you start combining them to set up longer phrases, there'll be thousands. This brings up an interesting point about working on material. Whenever you're working on something new, the only time you can be reasonably thorough at looking at it is by starting with the smallest bits possible, because once you begin combining these into larger units, the possibilities become almost limitless. It's kind of like ones and zeros in computer code. You could never work on them all, but you don't have to. Just like a horn player practicing chord scales. They'll practice the same scale a lot of different ways to get used to the notes and how they can put them together. Then they'll use all of these possibilities to improvise when that chord scale comes up in a tune. Likewise, when you work through all of the basic moves with doubles, you'll be able to start creating your own ideas for fills and solos. So the three amigos in this routine are what, 16th notes, how, double strokes, where, all around the set. Okay, now I want to make another point here that's kind of a big deal if you stop and think about it. If you do what I'm describing, you're going to play hundreds of examples. Some very easy, some a little tough, some are really killers. So you have to decide what you're going to do. Just take the easy stuff, or go for the gold, or something in between, which I think is what most people will wind up doing. So you want to look at everything, try out everything, and over time it will sort itself out. So this brings up one of the golden rules that a drummer should always remember, the no one knows rule. And it goes like this. No one knows what you don't know, and no one knows what you can't play. You're judged 100% by what you do play. So when you're learning new stuff, find the parts that you like and build from there. One of the coolest ideas I ever saw a student come up with involved using moving and broken doubles in both hands to create the samba clave rhythm on the snare drum. Right hand between the ride cymbal and snare, left hand between closed hi-hat and snare. It looked great, and it sounded great. See if you can figure out how he did it. So have fun with this stuff, and I'll see you next time on Patterns with Gary.